Hello. So, this week we're going to be talking about the life of the Buddha. Now, the reason that we're spending a week on this is not only is it really important to engage with Buddhist texts that you know this story, because a lot of texts presume that you know the story, but it's also important because a lot of ideas appear in the context of narratives. So, it's not just philosophical treatises that have ideas, they can be embedded in stories too, and the life of the Buddha is an example of that. So the way we're going to proceed is, first I'm going to tell you a little bit about Buddhas and the etymology and a bit of the history of different versions of the life of the Buddha. And then I'm going to sort of go through the life story or a summary of it, and that's going to be in two parts. And then finally we'll talk about some interpretive issues, so how different people have read and understood the life story of the Buddha. So to start with, you need to know that the term Buddha is not someone's name. It doesn't refer to a specific individual. It's a title that someone can get. So you can be the CEO of something, or you can be vice president, or you can be king, or whatever. Those are titles that a person can attain, and the Buddha is like that. It's from a Sanskrit word. So Sanskrit terms are often derived from verbal roots. So the way that like our word running comes from the word run, the verb run. So a lot of Sanskrit words work that way. And here the word Buddha is from the root bud, meaning to wake up. So if you're taking a nap and then you wake up, that's it. You used to be asleep and you are now awake. That's where a lot of Buddhist kind of rhetoric about awakening comes from the etymology of Buddha. So within Buddhism, there are a lot of Buddhas. There are Buddhas in the past, there's going to be Buddhas in the future. A lot of times there's ideas about a Buddha appears and then gives teachings, and then slowly the teachings are forgotten, and when the teachings are totally forgotten, then a new Buddha appears. Not all Buddhists accept that, but that's something that some Buddhists think. So now particular Buddhas have different names. So the previous Buddha was named Dipamkara, and the next Buddha is going to be named Maitreya. There's Buddhas in other places. There's a lot of Buddhas. Now when people talk about the Buddha, they mean the historical Buddha, our Buddha, the Buddha that was born in our world a few thousand years ago and taught around Nepal and India and passed on and whatever. Now, some people in the Western world picture the Buddha in a weird way. So there's another figure named Budai or Hotei. That's a fat, smiling, bald guy. That is not the Buddha. That's a different figure, and that figure is sometimes associated with the future Buddha Maitreya, but it's a different person. So if you're thinking of a jolly, fat, smiling guy, you're not picturing the Buddha. You're picturing someone else. And as you'll see from the life story, the Buddha spent a long time as a renunciate and eating very little, and he was not very fat. There's statues of him at this time where you can see all his ribs. He's really skinny. So the other thing that you should be thinking about is when we go through the story is different questions you can ask about a story. So one thing is like, did it happen? Did things literally happen the way that the story says? Another thing to think about is, what is the lesson? What am I supposed to get? What does the story convey? So those can come apart. So for example, you might read a novel or watch a movie that isn't true. The stuff didn't really happen. It's a made up story. But you might learn something about human psychology, about human relationships that you didn't know before. And that lesson is true. That's true of real people. So how you relate to it can be complicated. I just want to flag that before we're going through the story. Another thing to keep in mind is I'm going to sort of summarize a version of the life story, but there are many, many versions of this. The life story of the Buddha is practically a literary genre in itself. There's tons of versions. So A famous one, Ashvaghosha, has this text, The Acts of the Buddha, that's around 300 CE. There are a lot of different versions. I put up some excerpts from the Pali Canon that describe different episodes in the life of the Buddha. But I also put up a comic from India in the 80s. There's a comic book company called Amar Chitrakatha that makes comics of different epics and religious figures, and this is one version of the life of the Buddha. So that gives you a kind of nice, easy to read introduction for it. If you're into comics, a Japanese comic artist, Osamu Tezuka, has a multi-volume comic of the life of the Buddha. He takes a lot of liberties with the story. He introduces new characters, but he's sort of riffing on certain things in the received version. I'm also going to put a link to a virtual arts exhibit that's you can look at different works of art depicting different episodes that we're going to talk about in the life of the Buddha. So if you're interested in art, or if you're kind of visual, you should check that out, because you'll be able to see these works of art and understand what they're depicting